Hey guys, tonight we set sail on a creaking wooden deck, waves lapping against the hull as the wind tugs at your worn canvas sleeves. Your boots are slick with seawater, or maybe something worse, and the faint smell of tar, salt pork, and unwashed humanity clings to everything. You're aboard a ship in the 18th century, surrounded by men who haven't seen land or fresh fruit in weeks. And tonight, oddly enough, we're talking about toothpaste. Or rather, the pirate-adjacent, explosion-risking, salt and gunpowder concoction that passed for it. Yes, sailors, those fearless navigators of the world's oceans, had their own way of keeping their teeth, some of them, anyway, from falling out mid-voyage. And it wasn't minty fresh. You're probably not going to survive this dental adventure if you're squeamish. But don't worry, you won't need a toothbrush, just a pinch of courage, a few grains of gunpowder, and maybe a dash of vinegar. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing our sleepy global crew. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge the deck in the pre-dawn fog, breathing in the briny air and steeling yourself for another grueling day aboard His Majesty's vessel, or perhaps a French frigate, creaking ominously somewhere in the Caribbean. Either way, you're part of a crew expected to function with military precision and maritime discipline. But hygiene, that's more of a self-guided activity. On land, brushing your teeth was barely a notion, let alone a ritual, but out at sea, it was survival. Sailors were surrounded by salt water, stale biscuits, and not a single trained dentist for thousands of miles. And so they turned to what they had: black powder, salt, vinegar, and whatever scraps of cloth or bone bristle they could repurpose. If it sizzled, stung, or burned, it was probably cleansing. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or a fringe survival hack passed among desperate men. The accounts we have are scattered, tucked between ship's logs, naval manuals, and the occasional horrified memoir. What we do know, tooth decay wasn't just unpleasant, it was deadly. An infected molar could escalate to an abscess and then to sepsis. Without antibiotics or modern surgery, death by toothache wasn't rare. Imagine trying to man a cannon while pus drains into your throat. Exactly, so sailors improvised. Gunpowder, a mix of charcoal, sulfur, and saltpeter potassium nitrate, was abrasive enough to scrub. Charcoal had absorbent properties, saltpeter had vaguely antiseptic effects, and sulfur, well, it just smelled like you meant business. You pinch some gunpowder between your fingers, the grains gritty and sticky. You rub it across your teeth with a scrap of sailcloth, or if you're lucky, a pig bristle brush bought back in port. It tastes like campfire and rot. You spit overboard, black foam disappearing into the sea. Does it work? Maybe a little. It certainly feels effective, like brushing your teeth with very fine gravel. Whether it actually reduced bacteria is questionable, but the friction cleaned surface stains at least. Some sailors added salt or vinegar to the mix, which stung like a cannon blast but probably killed a few germs on contact. Of course, this wasn't regulated. No admiral handed out dental charts. But between the formal naval surgeons and the folklore that passed from one crew to the next, this harsh routine became part of life for those who could stand it. And not all sailors did. Some laughed it off, others claimed it made their gums bleed or explode. Superstitions ran wild. One crewman reportedly refused to brush with powder because it angered Neptune. Another swore it kept sea witches from stealing his voice. Then there's the paradox. The very stuff used to ignite cannons was also, in small doses, rubbed into open gums. You'll want to remember that next time you complain about flossing. Still, the logic wasn't entirely unsound. In a world where moldy cheese, rum, and scurvy were constant threats, something abrasive and vaguely antibacterial felt like divine intervention, even if it made your breath smell like burnt fireworks. By the mid-1700s, this practice had reached enough ears that British Navy manuals began quietly mentioning hygiene, if only in vague, disciplinary tones. Sailors who showed up for roll call with visibly decaying teeth were sometimes reprimanded, not for health reasons, but because it made them look unfit for the king. Meanwhile, French sailors often used wine vinegar in their routines, sometimes as a rinse, sometimes mixed with salt or ash. They mocked British seamen for their powder smiles, while quietly suffering from their own dental catastrophes. Toothbrushing wasn't exactly a bonding ritual, but it wasn't private either. When you live shoulder to shoulder with 300 men in a floating wooden barrel, everything becomes public, including oral hygiene. You're crouched by a barrel, scrubbing away with a cloth that smells suspiciously of rum. A nearby sailor wipes his mouth with a sleeve and offers a tip. If it don't sting, it don't clean. You nod. You're not sure if he's a genius or concussed, but the sentiment is oddly convincing. That's the world you're in now. The high seas, where brushing your teeth might involve explosive powder, shared cloths, and enough superstition to fill a ship's hold. And it's only going to get weirder from here. The muskets are stacked in neat rows below deck, flanked by barrels of black powder that could send the whole ship skyward if someone's pipe goes astray. You're careful where you step. Gunpowder is everywhere, in your clothes, under your nails, stuck in the creases of your hands. But today, it's not going into a musket, it's going into your mouth. You're part of a ship's company now, a British sailor, perhaps, aboard a man of war in the 1740s, or a French marine, enduring the stale hierarchy of the Bourbon Navy. Either way, you're among the mouths behind the muskets, the men whose job it is to keep the cannons loaded, the decks scrubbed, and, oddly enough, your own teeth in working order. You may not have mirrors, but you do have each other, and nobody wants to bunk next to a man with gums like rotting fruit. The ship wakes early. Hammocks are stowed before the sun even cracks the horizon. You gulp down salted pork and weevil-ridden hardtack, chewing more from duty than desire. And after breakfast comes the most curious moment of the day, the quiet ritual of mouth cleaning. It's not mandatory, but it is noticed. The boatswain might squint at your teeth while issuing orders. The ship's surgeon, if your vessel is lucky enough to have one, might check your breath for signs of festering infection. And so you reach for the little leather pouch tucked into your sea chest, a rag, some powdered charcoal, maybe a pinch of black powder if you're feeling brave or cocky. Gunpowder toothpaste is not a one-size-fits-all affair. Some sailors mix it with water into a paste. Others apply it dry for that extra crunch. The bravest, or most foolhardy, scrub with a damp cloth and powder straight from the musket bag. There's no regulation for this. No naval rulebook outlines the proper amount to use. It's all passed down from the older deckhands, some of whom swear by it and others who have no teeth left to swear with. One old hand tells you that black powder cleans better if you let it sit for a full minute on your teeth. Another claims that's nonsense. It just burns holes in your gums. You'll end up with more mouth than man, he mutters, spitting a gob over the side. What's not up for debate is that seafaring life eats teeth like cannonballs eat timbers. Your diet is starch-heavy and vitamin-light, fresh produce, maybe in port if you're lucky. The rest of the time, it's salted meat, dry biscuits, and the occasional spoiled barrel of pickled cabbage, not exactly a dentist's dream. Historians still argue whether naval officers cared much about their sailors' teeth. Officially, dental health wasn't tracked unless it affected performance. Unofficially, though, clean teeth became a strange kind of silent status symbol, proof that you weren't completely falling apart at sea. Among your mates, there's a quiet pecking order. The guy with the blackest breath gets the hammock by the latrine. The ones who put in a little effort, even just a rinse of vinegar, earn more respect. There's even a rumor going around that clean teeth might get you picked for shore patrol, where you'll be seen by the locals. Whether that's true or just hopeful fiction is anyone's guess. You hear snippets of stories, passed between men cleaning their mouths, French sailors who used lemon peels as tooth scrapers. A Dutch captain who ordered daily vinegar rinses for his crew and boasted 0 cases of scurvy, though several cases of very angry gums. A Spanish gunner who mixed gunpowder with wine and accidentally set his beard on fire. One man claims to have used powdered coral. Another swears by rum-soaked hemp. Another says he just gargles salt water and prays. You scrape and scrub while these tales float around you like pipe smoke, equal parts folklore and survival manual. The cloth in your hand is coarse, it used to be part of a sail. Your makeshift brush smells of tar and mildew. Still, you go through the motions. You rub until your gums tingle, spit into a bucket, and wipe your lips with a calloused hand. It's not glamorous, it's barely effective, but it's something. And in a world where rats sleep in your boots and your bunkmate hasn't changed shirts in 3 weeks, anything resembling cleanliness feels like a small rebellion. You steal a glance at the powder barrel, wondering again who first thought, yes, this explosive substance, let's put it in our mouths. The answer, as it turns out, is lost to history. Perhaps it was an accident. Someone absent-mindedly rubbed powder onto a sore tooth and found the burn oddly refreshing. Or maybe it began as a punishment and turned into a habit. Sailors are resourceful like that. The sun creeps higher. The deck fills with noise, orders shouted, ropes thrown, sails unfurled. You tuck your rag away and wipe your face on your sleeve. The moment of quiet has passed. Time to man the guns. Time to climb the rigging. Time to look like a man with teeth sharp enough to bite the wind itself. And if a bit of black powder helps you feel that way, so be it. The ocean doesn't care about your dental hygiene, and neither does the wind. It just whistles past your face as you haul lines, mouth tasting faintly of ash and iron. Still, there's a strange satisfaction in that post-scrub burn. Your gums tingle, your breath smells vaguely sulfurous, and for a few glorious minutes it feels like you've outrun rot. But black powder is a fickle friend. You're not entirely sure what's in it. Nobody is, not exactly. Sailors, after all, aren't chemists. You just know it works, sort of. That faint sting, that means it's doing something. Gunpowder in the 18th century is a coarse mix of charcoal, saltpeter, potassium nitrate, and sulfur. When packed into a musket, it becomes chaos incarnate, but on a wet rag gently rubbed across the molars, it becomes a kind of homespun dentistry, abrasive, antibacterial, and completely unregulated. Some say the sulfur keeps the worms away. Others whisper that it drives them deeper. There's no microscope aboard, no way to confirm if the tingling is purging bacteria or slowly searing your enamel. But that doesn't stop you, or any of your shipmates, from continuing the ritual. Besides, the alternative is worse. You've seen what happens when teeth go bad at sea. A swollen jaw here, a blackened canine there. Men groaning in their hammocks, clutching their cheeks, begging for clove oil that doesn't exist. When infection takes hold, it doesn't let go. The surgeon, if he's around and if he's sober, might offer to yank the tooth with iron pincers. No anesthesia, no sterilization. Just rum and grit and a sharp command to hold still. So yes, you'll take the gunpowder, thanks. There's something else, too. Black powder, when crushed fine and mixed with a bit of spirit or spit, leaves your teeth with a dull gunmetal sheen. Not bright, not white, but oddly respectable. A sailor's shine, some call it. It's a badge of the sea, a sign you've fought your own battles, even if they're just with tartar. Not everyone uses it, of course. Some men swear off any form of tooth cleaning, either from stubbornness or superstition. One sailor in your crew claims that rubbing your gums is a sin against nature, that God put the plaque there for a reason. Another insists that brushing stirs up spirits in the mouth. He tells this to anyone who will listen, while a greenish molar wobbles in his jaw like an old fence post. You nod politely. You still use the powder. Historians still argue whether gunpowder actually helped or harmed sailors' teeth. Some believe the potassium nitrate killed off mouth bacteria, reducing the risk of infection. Others point to the abrasiveness of the powder, warning that over time it wore down enamel and left the teeth vulnerable to rot. And then there are the debates about whether sailors truly used it often, or whether this was more an occasional experiment, something done on long voyages when nothing else was available. After all, clean powder was precious. You don't just waste it on molars when your next skirmish might be hours away. But you've heard stories, passed down from sailors in the know, about captains who quietly encouraged the practice. One tale tells of a Portuguese frigate whose men were all given tooth-scraping rags and allowed a daily pinch of gunpowder before breakfast. Another legend tells of a Danish crew that mixed powdered charcoal, tobacco ash, and gunpowder into a gray paste that supposedly left their breath smelling of campfire and confidence. It's hard to know what's true. Sea stories tend to drift, taking on salt and exaggeration with every telling. Still, you experiment. You try different cloths, a frayed scrap from your cuff, a bit of sail rope unwound into threads, even once, a fish scale which proves unwise. You learn that a drop of vinegar in the mix gives a satisfying fizz, but too much feels like your teeth are being boiled. And you learn discretion. You don't clean in front of the captain. You don't use powder the morning before a battle. You never borrow someone else's rag. Once is enough for that lesson. On days when the seas are calm and the air smells of tar and brine, you sit on a coil of rope and clean your teeth in peace, watching the sun bounce off the water like a signal from some far-off world. On other days, storms rage and the deck tilts and you're too busy to remember your own name, let alone your dental routine. But the habit persists. You keep the pouch of powder tucked away along with the rest of your meager possessions, a knife, a button from home, a twist of thread, a smooth pebble that reminds you of a girl you can no longer picture clearly. You wonder sometimes how landsmen manage their teeth. Do they have powders too, rags, silver picks? You imagine a merchant in London, dabbing his gums with clove oil and sipping tea from porcelain. You imagine he's never tasted charcoal, never heard the crackle of sulfur under his tongue, never brushed his teeth beside a cannon, listening to the water slap the hull. Pity him. You spit overboard and feel briefly that the ocean nods in agreement. By now, your tongue knows every corner of your mouth. It maps the roughness of molars, the gaps left by age or accident, the sharp ridge where a premolar once lived before a barrel chain snapped and took it with it. You've adjusted your chew. You've learned to smile with your lips closed. And each night, as the ship sways and the sky unfolds its stars, you reach for your pouch of powder, not just for cleanliness, but for comfort. You're not alone in this strange ritual. Others partake, and not always quietly. Across the deck, Big Jonah mutters something about clean teeth, clean conscience, as he vigorously rubs his gums with a strip of canvas soaked in rum and soot. The boatswain, more refined, dips a quill shaft into powdered charcoal and gently works it between his teeth like a sailor's floss. One man you know, Danny from Cork, uses burnt rope fibers, convinced that the hemp gives him holy breath. They all do it differently, but they all do it. Because on these long voyages, when land is a memory and sweet things are scarce, the mouth becomes sacred space. What you do to it matters. And when there's a lull in duties, when the sails are trimmed, the cannon's covered, and even the rats seem to nap, you'll find yourself among your crewmates, sharing black powder like it's tobacco. It's an odd kind of intimacy, this oral maintenance, not discussed much, but known. One man, Jasper, swears he once met a sailor who mixed crushed coral into his dental powder. From Tahiti, he claims with a wink, soft enough not to break your jaw, sharp enough to shave the plaque right off. Whether true or not, Jasper's teeth are the cleanest on deck, though a bit pinkish from blood. Now and then, the ship's cook offers something better, not out of kindness, but because he's superstitious. He believes bad breath invites bad weather. So once a month, he boils bay leaves and orange peel into a gritty paste he calls cannon bomb. It's terrible. It smells like a bruised citrus and tastes like boiled paper. But for one glorious week, everyone pretends it's a miracle tonic, then it's back to black powder. Historians still argue whether sailors across different navies shared these practices, or whether they developed organically, by necessity, habit, or hearsay. Some evidence suggests naval doctors in the Royal Navy occasionally issued dental dust, a mix of salt, chalk, and burnt bone. Others say that's just a romanticized myth, wishful thinking from modern minds who'd rather believe in preventative care than bleeding gums and pulled molars. And yet, something must have worked. Paintings of retired sailors from the period often show them with intact smiles. Maybe those portraits lie. Or maybe black powder was more than superstition. Maybe it kept them just clean enough to survive. Of course, there are dangers. Every so often, a careless man spills too much powder near a lamp. The result is rarely deadly but dramatic. A sudden flash, singed eyebrows, laughter from the crew. One man reportedly lost part of his beard that way. Another lost 2 fingertips, though no one's certain if it was the powder or a hungry crab. At sea, facts are flexible, And so the gunpowder becomes more than a tool, it becomes a story. You tell newcomers about it with a glint in your eye. You describe how it kills tooth ghosts or scares off rot beetles. You teach them to rub gently, to never use rope that's been tarred, and to always rinse after. Salt water makes a fine rinse, not pleasant but effective. You swish it in your mouth until your cheeks puff like sails, then spit it overboard where it lands with a delicate plop. There's something oddly spiritual about it all, like an offering to the deep. A trade, here, take this grime, this staleness, and give me one more night with my jaw intact. You wonder what landsmen would think of this ritual. Would they laugh, gasp, take notes? Probably all three. But at sea, practicality trumps comfort, and there's no toothpaste to be found, no gentle mint, no ergonomic brushes, just clothes, powder, and a stubborn will to not let your head rot from the inside out. You start to think of your pouch of powder as something more, not just a tool, but a relic, a sailor's charm. It's tied with a bit of string, worn soft with use, and you keep it in your shirt pocket, close to your heart. You imagine one day losing it. The thought makes your palms sweat. Because here's the truth, once you've cleaned your teeth with gunpowder, everything else feels tame, normal, boring. Like going from a musket to a feather duster. And though your gums occasionally bleed and your breath sometimes smells like a burned sausage, you know deep in your sailor's soul that you're doing something important. Maybe not right, maybe not smart, but important. And so you keep scrubbing. The ocean doesn't mind, it just watches. The sun is brutal today, a pale disk burned into a bleached sky. Your eyes narrow against the glare bouncing off the waves, and somewhere behind your temples, a throb begins to build, the kind that tells you the water ration's thin today and the rum's been watered down again. But still, the teeth must be cleaned. You sit with your back against a warm cannon, knees up, pouch of powder in your lap. The canvas beneath you smells of tar and sun-bleached sweat. Around you, a few of the lads are doing the same, those who haven't been called up to scrub deck or mend sails. It's a quiet moment, and you intend to savor it. Your cleaning cloth today is an old rag from a torn undershirt. It's frayed, soft from washing in brine, and it wraps nicely around 2 fingers. You dip it into your powder, a mixture more gray than black now, thanks to bits of crushed seashell you added last week. You'd heard somewhere, maybe from the Portuguese cook on that Spanish brig you boarded, that calcium helps with tooth strength. Who knows if it's true, but you liked the sound of it. The taste, however, is something else. Gunpowder mixed with shell fragments and soot has a particular crunch, like licking a fireplace and chewing sand, but you've grown used to it, you almost like the burn. It's a reminder that something is happening, and something is happening. Whether it's cleaning, polishing, or simply staving off decay through sheer ritual, it's doing. And in a sailor's life, where much of your time is spent waiting or working without end, doing something that feels like care is precious. A creak of wood. The groan of rope tightening above. Someone hums a folk tune about a girl named Nell with teeth like sugarcane. You chuckle softly. If Nell ever kissed someone with breath like yours after a month at sea, she'd probably faint dead away. Nearby, Mikhail, a Russian sailor picked up during a port transfer, uses a bit of driftwood as a toothpick. He's carved it sharp at one end, rubbed ash into the tip. Keeps the demons out, he mutters, tapping his temple. Bad teeth, bad thoughts, you nod. It makes sense in its own way. Historians still argue whether sailors in the 18th century truly believed that dental hygiene connected to mental well-being. Some journals suggest they did, that clean teeth warded off sailors' madness, a kind of cabin fever paranoia. Others think it's retroactive wishful thinking from modern readers who want their ancestors to have been more enlightened. The truth, as always, is likely both and neither. You pause your scrubbing and spit overboard. The water catches it, carries it away. You watch the ripple fade, and for a second, you imagine your molars shining like cannonballs, white and ready for battle. Then you wince. There's a tender spot behind your last molar. You poke at it with the cloth-wrapped finger, and the pain flares. Probably nothing, or the beginning of something, but you'll deal with it later. That's the sailor way. The bosun walks past and gives you a nod. You lift your chin in greeting, cloth still stuffed in your cheek like a pirate's plug of tobacco. He chuckles. That the new mint flavor? He says, you smile around it. Aye, tastes like vengeance. He moves on, chuckling. You finish your session with a final rinse from your flask, just a few drops of water, swished and spat. Then you dab at your lips with the rag, brush powder dust from your shirt, and tuck your pouch back into your jacket. Ritual complete. Around you, the others are wrapping up too. Some mutter to themselves, some stare silently at the sea. You realize, not for the first time, that this group of misfits, this floating collection of languages, scars, and half-remembered prayers, has developed a shared rhythm. A floating family of habits. And this one, this grim little ritual of mouth care and powder, is part of the beat. You once met a man who swore he used crushed cloves in his mixture. Picked them up in Zanzibar, he told you, eyes wide, burned like fury but no rot since. You'd give half your rations for cloves now, anything with scent. Anything that isn't salt, soot, or stale biscuit. Instead, you toy with the idea of adding dried kelp. You'd seen it dry into sheets, go brittle. Maybe ground fine enough it would clean and freshen, or maybe it would just taste like old fish, only one way to find out. You start making a mental list, what could be powdered. Dried lemon peel, too precious. Crushed chalk from the hull's bilge layer, possibly toxic. A bit of old hardtack, tempting in a self-sabotaging way. You'll experiment, carefully. After all, you've already risked using gunpowder, the literal stuff of explosions, as toothpaste. What's a little kelp in comparison? The sea keeps rolling. Your jaw feels cleaner, even if your breath probably still scares the crabs. And as you return to your station, hands rough with salt, mouth tingling with faint chemical fire, you catch yourself thinking, was that nice? Not pleasant, but nice. A small defiance against the decay. The sails flap lazily above you, canvas cracking against the masts like a slow applause. The midday heat presses down as if someone has laid an entire wool blanket over the Atlantic. And you, caught between a barrel and a baluster, are fiddling with your tooth powder again, trying to make it last. You shake the pouch gently. Not much left, it's a problem you've been ignoring. The ship's powder master won't just hand you more charcoal or sulfur for hygiene. That's not what it's for. Gunpowder is a precious commodity needed for battle, not for molars. And if you start begging for a scoop every few days, someone's bound to ask questions. You consider instead the art of trade. Life aboard is built on barter, an extra spoon of sugar for an old sock, a clean button for a page from someone's almanac. It's the unspoken language of need and boredom. And lately, you've noticed certain men hoarding strange things. Old Anders, with the terrible limp, has a stash of cloves. You saw him chewing one the other day while peeling tar from his fingers. Where he got them, who knows, maybe smuggled from port, or maybe traded from a passing merchant. Either way, they're gold now. And Marcos, the Spanish gunner with a secret love for gardening, has dried orange peels. He keeps them in a little tin, cracked down the middle, says they help with seasickness, though you're not convinced. You do know they smell amazing. You set your sights on both. The next few days are a slow campaign. You offer to scrub Anders' bunk frame. You help Marcos fix a jammed powder scoop in exchange for a smile. And eventually, through layers of polite nods and mild persuasion, you manage to trade for both 2 cloves and 3 curls of dried peel. They go into your cleaning pouch like treasure. You crush 1 clove into shards with the butt of your knife and mix it into the remaining powder. The orange peels you leave whole for sniffing, your version of aromatherapy. The next morning you clean with this new blend. The clove has a spicy sharpness that makes your gums tingle. It burns more than the usual powder in a way that almost feels pleasant. A cleansing fire, you think, while spitting black grit over the rail. Your teeth feel smoother, your breath less like an open grave. You lean on the edge of the deck, letting the wind hit your cheeks. A bit of the powder sticks to your tongue and makes your eyes water, but you smile anyway. It's progress. Across from you, 2 of the younger sailors are watching. One Samuel, barely 16, says, "What's that black stuff you're always chewing?" You wave your pouch. "Magic. Keeps your teeth in your head." He wrinkles his nose. "Tastes like cannon smoke." "Better than tooth rot," you reply. "Or scurvy," the other adds. He's right. Scurvy is the true silent killer here. By now, most sailors know that citrus keeps it at bay, though not everyone has access. Sometimes, if you're lucky, there's lime juice mixed into the grog. But when that runs out, well, your gums start bleeding, your teeth loosen, and one day you wake up to a pillow full of molars. You've seen it. You don't want to see it again. And so, this odd little ritual, the burning powder, the cloth, the spit and rinse, feels like resistance. Historians still argue whether the gunpowder actually helped. Some say it was all psychosomatic, that the abrasion merely gave the illusion of cleanliness. Others point to journals, records of older sailors with remarkably good teeth, and suggest there was something in the sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal that fought bacteria, even if it stung like hell. You're not sure, but something in you believes it works. You end up sharing a pinch of the mix with Samuel, watching his face twist as he tries it. He coughs, sputters. That's horrible. Means it's working, you say. Soon, a few others ask about it. You start a quiet trade, a pinch of powder here, a cloth square there. You teach them how to scrub gently, not too hard, how to spit downwind, and how to dry the rag in the sun to prevent mold. Before long, you've got yourself a little tooth cleaning crew. You joke about giving it a name, the Black Molars, or the Charcoal Society. Someone paints a little skull with shiny teeth on the side of a rum barrel. It's all nonsense, of course, but it passes the time. And at night, when the lanterns sway and the sea grumbles under the hull, you feel a strange sort of peace. Your mouth is sore, yes, your hands stink of sulfur, but your teeth feel clean, and that in this floating chaos is a kind of sanity. One night, Marcos confides in you. My grandfather, he says, used to brush with tobacco ash, said it kept the mouth warm and the devils out. You nod. Mine used vinegar and coal dust. Did it work? Don't know. He had no teeth left when I met him. You both laugh quietly. The sea laughs too, lapping against the ship. Somewhere, a rope creaks. Someone snores. And you drift off with the taste of cloves in your mouth and the faintest curl of orange peel tucked into your shirt pocket like a talisman against rot. Morning comes slowly at sea. The light doesn't crash in, it leaks, grays out the stars, and washes everything in a sort of hazy, pewter glow. You're already up, pacing the deck in half-awake circles. Your jaw aches, not painfully, just a dull throb, the echo of yesterday's scrubbing. A few others are up too. Anders sits cross-legged on a coil of rope, massaging his bad leg. Samuel is squinting into the powder pouch you lent him. And Marcos, well, he's humming something tuneless while polishing a metal flask with his sleeve. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is salted pork and ship's biscuit. The pork tastes like old boots, the biscuit is more weevil than flour. You pick through it anyway, nothing like protein and parasites to start the day. Afterwards, you dig into your cleaning kit again. It's a strange ritual now fully embedded in your routine. Pouch, cloth, water from your tin cup, a dash of crushed clove. You glance at Samuel, already doing the same, albeit with a face that suggests he's chewing a burning rope. Routine. That's the real secret here. Not the ingredients, not the precise blend of gunpowder or crushed rind, but the consistency. The ritual? In a world where storms, orders, and violence arrive without warning, this small act of control is priceless. Today, though, your ritual is interrupted. "Oi, you there," calls a voice, sharp and nasal. "Come show the doc your teeth." You turn. It's the ship's surgeon, Farquhar, a small man with permanently suspicious eyebrows and a flair for collecting odd specimens in jars. He's standing beside a rickety folding table on the quarterdeck, where a makeshift infirmary has been set up. There's a dead fish in a bucket. No one knows why. You walk over reluctantly. "Open," Farquhar says, snapping on a pair of gloves that look like they were once white. "Wider, I won't steal your soul." You oblige. He peers into your mouth with a smudged brass reflector and a stubby, soot-covered candle. "Well," he says, stepping back, "not bad, not great, mind you, but better than most." You blink. "Thanks," he snorts. "That one over there's got green gums, looks like moss on a tombstone." You glance at the unfortunate that one. Poor soul. Farquhar leans in. "You've been cleaning, haven't you? Let me guess, charcoal and vinegar. Gunpowder, you say. And clove, bit of citrus peel." He raises a single eyebrow, which somehow feels like a slap. "Ah, one of those. You lot think sulfur wards off demons too." You shrug. "So far, no demons. Just don't blow your jaw off." He waves you away, then pauses. "Actually, come back tomorrow. I want to look again, for research." And just like that, you're part of a study. Over the next few days, Farquhar calls in a few others, your little cleaning crew. and begins noting things down in a ledger. Who has bleeding gums? Who has loose molars? Who can still chew salted pork without wincing? You overhear him mutter things like, might be worth an article, and the Admiralty will never believe this. You're tempted to ask if there's a prize, but you hold your tongue. Still, it's odd being watched. Before this, no one cared what went into your mouth as long as you didn't die from it. Now you're the subject of naval dental innovation. Historians still argue, you muse one evening, whether this was the moment preventive medicine at sea took a turn. Samuel glances up from his cloth. What's preventive mean? Means we do stuff before we're dead. Like praying? Like cleaning your teeth with stuff meant to explode. He grins. Sounds like praying to me. Jokes aside, you begin noticing small changes. Your gums don't sting as much, your breath less horrifying. And perhaps most surprisingly, you start feeling a little more dignified. It's a strange word for life aboard a creaking wooden behemoth where rats nap in your boots, but there it is. Clean teeth give you confidence. You laugh easier, smile more, even flirt with a passing merchant's daughter once when docked. She asked if you'd swallowed ink. You told her it was naval cologne. She didn't laugh, but she also didn't run. One night, Anders tells a story. Back in the Indies, he begins, I met a fella who cleaned his teeth with crushed coral. Said it made his teeth sparkle. Did it work, you ask? Maybe, but he died from eating spoiled turtle, so who knows? You all nod solemnly. That tracks. Then someone else mentions using brick dust. Another, ashes mixed with rum. The conversations blossom. Suddenly, it's not just you and your cloth. It's a ship-wide investigation into the mouth's mysterious upkeep. Everyone's got a theory. Everyone's got a trick. Someone even starts a rumor that chewing hardtack builds jaw strength. You try it. It doesn't. And yet, amidst all this, Farquhar keeps observing. One evening, he pulls you aside, journal in hand. You've got fewer mouth ulcers than anyone else on this damn ship, he says. I'm not saying your gunpowder works, but... He taps his pen. It's not working. You nod slowly. Want me to write that down for your article? He smirks. I'll write it. You just keep scrubbing. And so you do. Every morning and evening, no matter the swell, rain or shine, sometimes with water, sometimes without. Once, during a particularly brutal storm, you even tie your pouch to your belt so it won't fly overboard. You scrub by moonlight, leaning into a barrel to shield from the wind, while the sea tries to yank the ship apart beneath you. And still, the ritual holds. It becomes a quiet rebellion against decay, against neglect, against the unspoken rule that sailors must rot slowly. You clean, you share, you trade cloves for kindness, peel for peace of mind. And through it all, you begin to wonder what would happen if every sailor did this. If every ship had a tooth powder pouch instead of just a powder keg. You won't know. But maybe Farquhar's journal will outlive you. Maybe someone will read it. Maybe someone will try it. And maybe, just maybe, 100 years from now, some poor sailor will thank you, not by name, but with every clean, aching tooth in his head. Somewhere off the coast of the Canary Islands, the wind softens. The waves no longer slap the hull so much as nudge it, like a cat half interested in affection. You lean against the rail, watching the sea blink in copper ripples as the sun yawns into view, and you smile. Not because you're joyful, though you aren't entirely miserable, which is something, but because your teeth don't feel like they're about to abandon ship. You've made it this far without losing any molars, and that alone feels like a small miracle. The others, your quiet circle of scrubbers, are similarly intact, though Marcos swears one of his teeth is beginning to glow slightly from all the powder. He's joking, probably. Farquhar, ever the goblin with a notebook, starts a log. Every man who participates in the ritual, gunpowder, clove, citrus, or whatever odd blend they concoct, is listed. He takes notes on bleeding, looseness, decay, and his new favorite metric, chewing confidence. You rate yourself a 7.5, not bad for a man who once cracked a bicuspid on pickled eel. But beneath the jokes, a quiet respect grows. You, who once scooped black powder out of desperation, have become a sort of accidental trendsetter. A dental influencer, if you will, centuries ahead of your time, and like all trendsetters, you face the inevitable backlash. It starts with Bramley. A wiry, bitter fellow from Yorkshire, Bramley has had enough. Enough powder, enough Farquhar, enough of what he calls pretend science. One morning, with the self-importance of a man about to invent mud, he announces he's going back to seawater gargles and divine will. You say nothing. but you watch. 3 days later, Bramley can't finish his biscuit. His jaw clicks audibly during meals. By the 5th day, he's chewing with one side and inventing increasingly creative curses about sulfur. By the 7th, he's back, grudgingly asking Samuel if he's got spare clove. Historians still argue, you think, watching him spit quietly over the side, whether this was the first documented case of oral hygiene FOMO. There are others, of course. The ship has nearly 200 men. Some simply refuse to try. Others don't have the ingredients or don't care or think it's too much fuss for something that doesn't kill you outright, but enough stick with it. And slowly the experiment spreads. Someone starts soaking their cloth in brandy just for kicks. Someone else tries crushing burnt orange peel with charcoal. It stinks but reportedly works. Farquhar starts drawing charts in the margins of his journal. He's calling them oral condition schematics, though to you, they just look like smiling stick men with big teeth. One evening, as the moon flattens itself across the sea and the breeze starts whispering ghost stories, you find yourself on the main deck with 4 others, all sitting in a lazy half-circle, scrubbing in silence. It feels strange, sacred almost, a strange little ritual that has nothing to do with orders or rank, just you, powder, and peace. Then Marcos breaks the silence. Imagine explaining this to your old man, you chuckle. Mine would ask if I'd gone soft. Mine would ask if I'd found religion, says Samuel, rubbing his gums. Anders grins. I'd say yes. The church of clove and clean breath. You raise your tin cup. Praise be. It becomes a kind of in-joke. Whenever someone finishes brushing, they mutter, blessed be the bite, or in sulfur we trust. Marcos sketches a tiny emblem in his journal, a toothbrush crossed with a cannon. You all agree it's ridiculous. Then you agree it should be a flag. Somewhere around week 5, Farquhar starts whispering about writing to the Royal Society. They won't believe it, he says. They'll think I've gone mad, but if we can prevent mouth rot, if just one ritual, can reduce mortality. He trails off, staring into his bubbling flask like it holds the secrets of the universe. It doesn't. It holds whale oil and a shrimp, but he seems content. Not all is sweet-smelling success, of course. A sailor named Henley tries mixing gunpowder with crushed fish bones. For the calcium, he says, he ends up with bleeding gums and a smell that drives 2 bunkmates to sleep outside. Another lad gets creative with mustard seeds. The burn is intense. He says it cleans the soul. He's probably concussed. And then there's the time the ship hits a sudden squall and half your gear goes sliding across the floor. Powder spilling into the deck seems like strange black pollen. You gather what you can. You mourn the rest. You learn, grimly, that peppercorns are not an acceptable substitute. Still, setbacks aside, the movement holds. You begin noticing subtle shifts in morale. Tooth pain isn't just discomfort, it's distraction. It keeps men up at night. It makes tempers short. And now, with fewer aching jaws and fewer festering gums, things feel lighter. You even sleep better once the sharp edges are blunted. You dream about absurd things, floating toothbrushes, smiling sharks, a gum fairy with a peg leg. One morning, Farquhar summons you. He looks excited, almost dangerously so. His notes are spread across the table like a magician's deck. You're not going to believe this, he says, voice hushed. But the youngest lads, the ones who started the regimen early. Not a single cavity. You raise a brow. Cavity, he waves dismissively. Rot, you know, holes in the enamel, they're clean, all of them. You lean in. So, he lowers his voice further, as if the sea might be listening. If we start them young, new sailors, boys barely out of the cradle, we might be able to keep their teeth until discharge. That's noble, he beams, and revolutionary. Then he adds, quieter and probably worth a promotion. You don't say it, but you think it. Teeth might not win wars, but they might keep more sailors alive to see the end of one. And that's something. So you keep brushing. You keep sharing. You keep showing up each morning, cloth in hand, breath slightly less terrible than the day before. Because at sea, there are so few things you can control. But your teeth are yours. You're leaning against the forward rail again, same old spot, same sun in your eyes, same briny breeze licking your cheeks like a bored dog, and you realize something peculiar. You haven't had mouth pain in weeks. Your molars don't feel like ticking time bombs. Your breath doesn't smell like rotting herring. Even your tongue, usually coated in the taste of yesterday's misery stew, feels normal, and that's when it hits you. You're healthy, well, relatively, and you're not alone. All around the ship, subtle changes are taking root. There's Bramley, that eternal skeptic, now brushing quietly each morning with a lump of chalk and oil, like no one noticed his change of heart. Samuel's crafted a tiny wooden box for his cleaning supplies. Keeps the weevils out, he says proudly, though you suspect it's more about the ritual than the pests. And then there's Anders, who now refuses to eat without first brushing. Makes the food taste like something, he says, swirling his crushed clove concoction like a wine critic. The oddest part, the officers have started to notice. It begins with Lieutenant Wexley. He's inspecting the hammocks one morning, part of his endless crusade against moral decay and mildew, when he pauses at Farquhar's bunk. What's this? He demands, plucking the cloth and sulfur pouch with 2 fingers like they might explode. Farquhar, never one to cower, replies coolly, "Personal hygiene, sir." Wexley snorts. "You'll scrub the gums right off your teeth." Then, after a beat, though I do recall Admiral Collingwood used vinegar and ash, you glance at Farquhar, who raises a brow. He'll be writing that down later. Historians still argue, you think to yourself, whether this was the first time an officer pretended not to steal a sailor's idea. But it doesn't stop there. 3 days later, Wexley has breath like an herbal garden and a fresh tin of baking soda. He never says anything. Just nods at you once during breakfast, the silent salute of one clean-mouthed man to another. Soon after, Surgeon Brinsley calls for a meeting. Not the kind with charts and scalpel diagrams. He's more of a cut-now, ask-later kind of man, but a quiet one in his cramped cabin with 5 of you hunched awkwardly around a map of the human skull. "What are you using?" he asks without preamble. You tell him everything. The powder, the clove, the oil, even the bizarre things that didn't work. Henley's fishbone paste gets a full paragraph. Brinsley listens, muttering occasionally. He scribbles a few notes, then sighs. "You understand," he says slowly, "that what you've created is highly unorthodox." You nod. "But it works." He smiles thinly. "Yes, that's the problem." Turns out the Navy has protocols, official practices, things approved by committees with powdered wigs and excellent handwriting. Self-medication, Brinsley mutters, especially when successful, tends to make people nervous. Still, he lets it be. He's not about to crush the one thing on this cursed voyage that's actually reducing medical complaints. And so the brushing continues. But now it spreads. First to the gun crew, burly men with palms like meat slabs who scrub their teeth with strips of hemp dipped in ash. Then to the galley boys who invent some kind of licorice root chew that doubles as a toothbrush and a snack. It tastes foul, but they claim it gives the molars a workout. You hear rumors that someone in the captain's quarters is using salt and lemon now. You don't believe it, but you want to. It's like watching a secret society bloom in plain sight. No passwords, no cloaks, just men quietly protecting the one part of themselves that isn't tattered or bruised. Farquhar, meanwhile, is ecstatic. His tooth logs have grown into something monstrous, a leather-bound journal of names, ingredients, injuries avoided, bleeding reduced, and something he's calling Smile Stability. He wants to publish it one day. It'll be a revolution, he whispers, eyes glittering. Imagine dental health at sea, you smirk. You'll be knighted. I'll settle for not being court-martialed. One afternoon, midway through repairs on a damaged sail, a strange thing happens. A passing merchant ship pulls alongside. Routine greetings are exchanged, supplies, messages, a few shouted insults, and then one of their crew shouts up, "Oi, are you the lot with the tooth powder?" You blink. The man laughs. Word gets around. "Some fella at port said your lads don't get gum rot." You glance at Farquhar, whose grin threatens to split his face. By sunset, you've traded a small pouch of your blend for a barrel of dried apples and 3 decent lemons. You're not just brushing now, you're bartering. It's absurd, it's ridiculous, it's glorious. And as you sit by the rail later, cloth in hand, brushing under a bleeding sky, you can't help but wonder, what if this really does change things? What if some future sailor somewhere far from here leans over a gleaming sink with a factory-made brush and minty paste and never once wonders how close he came to using burnt sulfur? Will he know it started here? Probably not. But you will, and that's enough. The first time you hear the phrase oral revolution, it comes from Bramley's mouth, and you nearly choke on your salted biscuit. You laugh, he says, brushing crumbs from his lap, but mark my words. In 20 years, the Queen'll be brushing twice a day like the rest of us. You don't argue. You've learned not to argue with Bramley when he's in one of his prophetic moods. He once declared the future would be powered by steam-farting whales. Still, you do wonder. Because lately, everything has started to feel different. Not just the brushing, not just the lack of toothaches or the fact that even old McLaren has stopped bleeding every time he eats dried fish. It's the atmosphere. You wake up each morning to the soft sounds of cloth rubbing enamel, to muttered curses over misplaced ash tins, to Farquhar humming as he inspects the newest tweak to his 4-strand cleaning coil, which looks suspiciously like rope, and something else happens. Your dreams change. You used to dream of sinking, of cannonballs and splinters and fire, of teeth falling from your mouth one by one like a grotesque countdown. Now you dream of lemon groves, of crisp air and smiling villagers handing you cinnamon sticks. Once you dreamed of brushing your teeth with a goose feather while the king clapped approvingly. When you mention this at breakfast, Bramley nods sagely. Hygiene dreams. Quite common once you start truly respecting your molars. Whether he's joking or not, no one can tell anymore. But even as this quiet revolution hums beneath the decks, the sea has its own plans. The first sign is the smell, not the usual stink. This is different. Oily, heavy, metallic. Tar maybe, or something worse. The next sign is the shout. Ship off the starboard quarter. You and half the crew tumble to the rail, squinting at the horizon. It's a sloop, fast, flag unknown. She's coming toward you at a gallop. The officers scramble. Cannons are loaded. The surgeon secures his instruments. You, oddly, grab your cleaning cloth and tuck it into your shirt. If I die, you mutter, my molars go with dignity. But the ship doesn't fire. She slows, draws closer, and then, to everyone's confusion, raises a white banner painted not with a crest, but with a crude sketch of a tooth. You blink. What in Neptune's gums? A rowboat is lowered. 10 minutes later, a wiry man with wild eyes and a suspiciously clean smile climbs aboard. Which one of you is Farquhar? Farquhar steps forward, cautious. The man bows dramatically. Thomas Beadle, apothecary, part-time preacher, full-time convert to your tooth gospel. Turns out, word spread faster than anyone imagined. That last trade, the apples for powder exchange, it sparked whispers in ports from Cadiz to Kingston. The idea of clean teeth, on a long voyage had sent shivers down spines from Plymouth to Port Royal. Beadle had chased those rumors for weeks, and now he's here, notebook in hand, ready to learn. Farquhar looks like he might cry. By nightfall, Beadle's interviewing half the crew. He sketches Bramley's vinegar rinse spoon, marvels at Anders' cinnamon oil swab, and listens to Samuel's theory that teeth cleaning improves morale by reminding the soul it's not just meat. The man's taking this seriously, almost too seriously. At one point he suggests organizing a society. Farquhar nearly faints. You lean over. What would we even call it? Bramley, of course, has an answer. The Royal Naval Fellowship of the Holy Molars. Everyone groans. Beadle proposes something simpler, the Guild of Nautical Hygiene. No one groans. A few men nod. It's absurd. It's happening. Still, not everyone's on board. Later that week, during night watch, you catch wind of muttering. A small group, mostly old-timers, gather near the aft hatch, whispering about unnatural habits and too much powder in the gums. They're skeptical. They miss the rot and the rum. They don't trust a man who smiles too often. Historians still argue whether this was the first recorded dental schism at sea, you think as you watch them disperse. But descent or not, the momentum is unstoppable. Farquhar makes copies of his logs, dozens of them, stitched in oilskin and tied with ribbon. Beadle helps distribute them whenever ships come within shouting distance. Even Brinsley, ever the reluctant supporter, donates a few anatomical diagrams and one unsettling sketch of a decayed jawbone labeled simply, "Don't be this." The final turning point. It comes during a skirmish, nothing major. A few warning shots, some shouted threats, and a tense afternoon of maneuvering. No injuries except one. A powder boy named Elias, just 15, slips on a coil of rope and chips a front tooth. You help carry him below. He's shaking, but it's not the pain that's bothering him. "It's ruined," he says, voice cracking. "My smile. My mum always said I had a proper smile." You want to reassure him, you try, but it's Farquhar who saves the day. He steps in quietly, examines the chip, then says, "I've got a plan." By sunset, Elias is grinning again. Farquhar fashioned a makeshift cap from softened wood, soaked it in mint oil, and fastened it with linen thread. Crude. Ugly, but it works. Elias marches around like royalty, proudly displaying his naval veneer. That night, Bramley coins a phrase, "Clean teeth, full hearts, can't lose." You don't know what it means, but it feels right. The next morning, your ship wakes to a new scent wafting through the lower decks, citrus and ash with just a hint of vinegar. You blink yourself into consciousness and find Bramley balancing a sloshing basin in one arm, swaying gently with the waves, and muttering something about pre-breakfast rinses being the mark of a true gentleman. You're not even mad, you're impressed. Somehow he's turned dental maintenance into a competitive sport, but it's not just Bramley. All over the ship, little routines have taken hold. Men organize cleaning circles. There are whispered debates over salt ratios and soft bristle effectiveness. McLaren, toothless but spirited, has taken to coaching younger lads like a pirate grandmother, offering gravelly commentary on swabbing technique. The guild, yes, they're calling it that now, is thriving. And yet, for all the cleanliness, for all the quietly shared powders and the strange, gleaming pride you catch in the glances of fellow sailors, something else begins to settle in, anxiety. Because soon, it'll be time to return to port. And once you return, what then? A merchant ship won't care how minty your breath is. The dockside taverns won't ask about your rinsing schedule. Even the Navy might laugh off your efforts as a salty prank. Historians still debate whether these early hygienic movements were sustained beyond the voyage. You think as you watch Farquhar staring out over the railing, one hand idly polishing a brass button with his rag, the same rag he once used for brushing. Beadle, always more animated than necessary, insists the guild will establish branches in every major port. His notebooks bulge with plans. He sketches enamel-shaped crests and oath scrolls, dreams aloud of seamen swapping cleaning methods across nations like recipes. You want to believe him, but a part of you wonders, will people back home see the value in what you've built? That night, Bramley calls a meeting. Not a mutiny-style one, no yelling, no threats, just a quiet gathering on the upper deck under a moon as polished as Farquhar's tools. The sea is unusually calm and the sails sag with sleep. Everyone's there. Bramley, arms crossed, gives a speech. It's the longest anyone's heard him speak without a joke. "We've scrubbed out more than teeth these last months," he says. "We've carved dignity into our bloody mouths, turned a ship full of rotters into gentlemen of the gums." There's chuckling. "But here's the rub," he continues. "What we've done doesn't end here unless we let it. You think the world's ready to hear a deckhand preach about flossing with hemp thread? Maybe not, but they're going to hear it anyway. And not from some admiral's letter or surgeon's pamphlet, from us, from you." He looks at each man in turn. "Next time someone sees your smile and asks why it doesn't look like an abandoned coral reef, you tell him. You say, because I'm part of something." You hand them a copy of Farquhar's manual, even if it's soggy, and if they laugh, you smile wider, that's all. He finishes with a nod and walks off, silence. Then Beadle starts clapping, then everyone does. You don't cry exactly, but you do feel something warm in your throat, like your molars themselves are proud. Over the next week, preparations for port intensify. The crew bustles with energy not entirely related to unloading. Farquhar packages his guides in bundles tied with blue string, easier to spot, he explains. Brinsley inks a final set of illustrations, including a labeled diagram called the social arc of molar maintenance. No one understands it, but it's beautiful. And you. You find yourself writing letters, not to family exactly, just to people. A tavern owner who once pulled your aching tooth with pliers, a schoolteacher you'd met in Plymouth, even your old bunkmate from your first voyage, dead now, sadly, thanks to scurvy and poor choices. You write him anyway. You tell them what you've learned, about powder and brine and vinegar, about pain and the absence of it, about how your smile no longer feels like something borrowed. The ship finally reaches port on a windy morning. The town is gray and lazy, the harbor hands grumbling as usual. Nothing seems different until the crew disembarks, because you disembark in formation, not official, not stiff, just unified. Each man with his kit bag and a linen pouch tucked visibly at his hip. Inside, a rag, a scoop, a bottle of ash or vinegar, and of course, a smile. You notice people stare. One child tugs at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, why do their teeth look like that?" The mother blinks. "Like what?" "Like they shine." And then, the question that sends a ripple down your spine, are they heroes? You laugh to yourself, not quite. But when a dock worker approaches and asks where you got your tooth powder, you pass him a scroll. You say, "There's more where that came from." And just like that, the story continues. You spend a few weeks in port. You hand out pamphlets. Some are burned, some are laughed at. But one, you hear, ends up in the hands of a Royal Navy admiral. Farquhar gets a letter 2 months later. A request. Would he be interested in drafting an official Navy hygiene protocol? The man faints clean off his stool. That night, the crew reunites in a tavern. Bramley buys the first round, swearing it's only because rum rinses the gums if swished properly. No one argues. You drink, you laugh. You reminisce about the first time you scrubbed with ash and cried from the sting. And then, as the candles burn low and the fire crackles softly, you all begin to hum the Guild's unofficial anthem, made up by Elias, whose wooden tooth has now become legend. Brush once for port and twice for sea, the molar is the key to glee. It's terrible, it's perfect. Your leave is brief. The sea doesn't tolerate long goodbyes, and before you know it, you're back aboard, this time on a different vessel, slightly larger, marginally less moldy, and crewed by faces both familiar and new. Farquhar stays behind to work with the Navy. He gives you a solemn farewell and slips a miniature copy of his manual into your coat pocket. Bramley salutes dramatically from the dock, his new walking stick fashioned from the old toothbrush handle he refused to discard. The air smells cleaner, or maybe that's just your imagination. As the ship casts off, the wind pulling at the sails like impatient fingers, you realize you're no longer just a sailor. You're a carrier of something oddly noble. You have duties. Powder pouch at your hip, vinegar flask lashed tightly, spare rags folded with care. Your new bunkmates eye you with suspicion. They ask questions, softly at first, then with that blend of curiosity and teasing typical of seafarers. So you scrub 'em, even the back ones. Gunpowder, you say. What for whitening? Vinegar, as in the drink ruiner. You nod patiently, smile wide, invite them to try a scoop. One lad does, he gags. You tell him that's part of the ritual. By the end of the week, he's the most obsessive cleaner on board. And just like that, it begins again. Historians still argue whether these self-started hygiene cults were expressions of genuine reform or simply coping mechanisms, something to anchor oneself to amid the chaos and salt. But does it really matter? Your mouth doesn't ache, your gums don't bleed, your breath doesn't scare off seagulls. That's enough. But this new voyage brings new challenges. For starters, the ship's surgeon is skeptical. He accuses you of undermining medical authority when he finds 2 lads swabbing their tongues with vinegar before breakfast. Your methods are unscientific, he sneers. You hand him a scroll, he sneers harder. Until, that is, a certain officer under his care develops a nasty gum abscess. You hear rumors, just whispers at first, that he tried Bramley's brine method in secret. The abscess shrinks. The officer eats solid food again. The surgeon doesn't apologize, naturally. But he does ask, in the privacy of his cabin, whether the powder must be black or if it can be white. You tell him it doesn't matter. He nods slowly. That night, he discovers a new ship-wide hygiene policy. It reads suspiciously like Farquhar's manual with half the adjectives removed. Still, a win's a win, then come the storms. 3 weeks of pitching, howling gales, and bruised shins. Teeth clench in fear. Rations go moldy, sleep becomes a myth, and yet every morning the crew gathers, hunched in corners, legs splayed for balance. Bracing against bulkheads, swabbing, scraping, spitting into storm-splashed buckets, there's comfort in ritual. Even as the sea screams, your powder pouch feels like an anchor. One night, you catch the first mate, known for his disdain of sailor nonsense, dabbing a pinch of salt under his tongue and humming the chorus to "Molar is the key to glee." You say nothing. In calmer waters, the guild rewakens. This time, it's subtler. No formal name, no scrolls, just men looking after each other's mouths. A busted molar gets packed with clove and wrapped in gauze. A shaky hand is steadied during scraping. a loose tooth is gently, lovingly mocked until it falls out on its own. You begin recording stories, not grand ones, no battles or mutinies, just quiet accounts, like the cook who replaced half his galley salt with ground-up coral for the crew's sake, or the quartermaster who used toothpicking duty as a reward for good behavior, or the old sailor who, after 20 years, admitted he'd never brushed before and cried the first time his gums stopped bleeding. These stories matter, because tooth by tooth, smile by smile, a kind of beauty is blooming where there was once only rot. Some of the newer crew members begin carving designs into their brush handles, waves, initials, tiny ships. One paints his with squid ink. Another braids horsehair around the base for grip. Art is everywhere, in hygiene. Who knew? One evening, you gather with your bunkmates and using old tar scraps and a bent spoon, you fashion a medal. It's lopsided. Smells faintly of herring, but it's beautiful. The Guild Medal, they call it, awarded for outstanding commitment to the teeth of the people. You pin it to your coat, wear it proudly. When the ship finally docks months later, this time in a warm southern port where parrots heckle you from trees, the first thing you do isn't rush to shore. No, you gather the crew, and together you pose for a portrait. No artist is present, of course. You just stand shoulder to shoulder, powder pouches out, smiles wide. The cook sketches it later from memory. And yes, it looks ridiculous, but it becomes legend. A copy ends up in a tavern, another in a brothel. One finds its way to the desk of a naval officer who had always assumed sailors preferred rot. Maybe you do, but now you know better. As your voyage ends, you're already planning the next. You hear rumors of sailors in other fleets doing the same, forming their own brushing rituals, adapting the vinegar method to wine, even experimenting with flavored ashes. One French ship reportedly added lavender, copycats, and yet you smile, because the movement has spread, not because of any official decree, not because someone forced it, but because a few tired, aching sailors got tired of pain. And did something absurd, and it worked. The next year's journey finds you sailing into uncharted waters. The skies shift from dull gray to shimmering azure, and the air smells different, saltier, crisper, like something is changing. You have the usual mix of routine and uncertainty, but there's something new in the way the crew moves this time. Gone are the half-hearted attempts at brushing. This time, it's a whole culture. The ship smells like mint and vinegar and the faintest trace of clove. New men join the crew with their own methods of teeth care, and they carry their own traditions. Some use powdered charcoal from the galley. Others, from far-flung places, bring in dried roots and herbs known only in whispered language. The guild grows. It's not just about survival anymore, it's a matter of pride. Sailors who once couldn't be bothered to clean their nails now consider their gums sacred. The first mate, that gruff fellow who once scoffed at anything that smelled of vanity, now grins as he dips a handmade bone scraper into a jar of homemade toothpaste. Historians, of course, still scratch their heads. They can't quite place how these tooth-cleaning rituals became a sailor's obsession. There are no books documenting the exact moment it took hold, no treaties on the matter of oral hygiene during wartime. But they keep trying to link it all back to a single event or era. Some argue it began with the Royal Navy's push for better discipline in the 1700s, and others still point to the fact that ships spent so much time off land that the crew turned inward, focusing on their personal well-being. Some say the British were simply obsessed with propriety, every part of a sailor's life tightly regimented right down to their mouths. But does it matter? History often leaves the smaller details behind. The real story isn't about official records, it's in the personal rituals, the quiet transformation. By the time the winds push your ship into the bustling port, your once simple habit of brushing your teeth with gunpowder has turned into a full-fledged naval custom. At the dock, you hear the buzz of people from other ships asking about your method. A ship's surgeon, newly assigned to your vessel, is impressed. She's heard of your dental guild, but upon seeing it firsthand, she declares it ingenious. The crew doesn't know what to make of this sudden respect, but you're smiling inside. You have your secrets, your rituals, your strange but effective knowledge, Perhaps you weren't born to be an explorer of the seas, but you're certainly a pioneer of sorts in your own right. It feels good. It's your little rebellion against the chaos of the waves. The surgeon, however, is no longer skeptical. In fact, she's just asked you to teach her a few tricks. Seems like you might be starting a revolution, after all. Word spreads from port to port, and soon, captains everywhere are looking for the mysterious method. They want to know if it's truly as effective as sailors claim. Some are willing to pay to have their men taught the ways of the powder and vinegar. But this isn't the first time you've seen such a thing happen. The history of the sea is filled with ideas that catch fire quickly, only to burn out once the next big trend comes along. You wonder how long this trend will last. How many years will pass before some clever surgeon develops a new, more scientific method, something less gritty, more official? You try not to care. Because for now, you're happy with the work you've done. You're happy to be the small, gentle force of change in a world that often feels too large to make an impact. Sure, sailors' teeth will eventually return to being just teeth. Perhaps next year, someone will suggest using seawater to freshen the breath. How very novel. But what they can't take away from you is the knowledge that, for a brief moment, the ship's whole crew, men who never thought twice about brushing, had mouths so clean, so cared for, that the legends of that strange, simple method would ripple across the waves, carried from ship to ship, port to port, until it became more than a secret, it became a tradition. And that, my friend, is how the world changes in the most unexpected ways.